All right, yes, indeed. It is once again time for the Kanika Lifestyle Podcast. I am your host, Kenny, and I am joined by the one, the only, Nika. Good afternoon, Nika.
Wow. Hello, Kenny over here, my handsome husband. Today is February 6th, and we have a very special podcast for you guys because we're going back to the 90s.
That's right, Nika. It is time once again for a hold up, everybody.
Hey, hold up there.
Wait now, hold the fuck up.
Whoa, hold up, player.
Hold it, kid. It's flimsy. It's not enough. It'll never hold up.
And just in case you're new around here or haven't heard one of these episodes in a while, because it's been a while since we've done one.
It has.
But it's that time of the year where we can sneak in a movie or a show episode or two because there's not baseball on every night. And there's not a lot of interesting sports on every single night. So
You mean pickleball is not it?
well, it is the cultural phenomenon that is sweeping the nation, but we don't have the pickleball channel, or we can't find any live pickleball at night. Tough
be a
times
problem.
out there, everybody. If you know of some live streaming pickleball in the evening hours on the Pacific Coast, let us know.
Cool.
Thank you. All right. Well, yes, that is correct. We are back with a hold-up episode, and today we are looking back at the 1994 film Stargate, everybody. Yes, Stargate. I before we get into all of the nitty-gritty with this, I just have to say, it's so weird to see this movie existing 15 years-ish or so before even Ancient Aliens came on TV. And I'm so sad that I missed this movie the first time, because had I seen this movie as a young 13-year-old, I guess I would have been in 13 in 1994. October 28th, by the way, it was the original theatrical release date.
Oh, okay.
So I would have been 13 already at that point. And I just wonder how a young 13-year-old mind of myself would have been sort of intrigued by what was being shown in this movie, because this is a lot of the ancient alien theories sort of enwrapped into one story, if you will.
There is a lot of this, and we are exposed to it a lot more today versus 94. So as a young 13-year-old, would you say you would have been more into it back in the day, or would that expose you to more of this world that you got into it earlier?
I might have. I feel like I might have. I don't know, for whatever reason. I knew friends that had seen this movie and were into it, but it never really went beyond the surface level. Oh, okay, it's just some action movie with pyramids. It didn't click on me that it was tapping into more human origin stuff and ideas like that.
And it came out on the heels of Indiana Jones and what else? Star Wars, probably.
Well, Star Wars wasn't until later in the 90s.
But not the OG Star Wars.
No, it was after that, for
So
sure.
sci-fi was around. Because this is a sci-fi
Yeah,
movie.
this was marketed more as sci-fi, and I was always leaning more towards adventure.
I see.
And I think there is a blatant difference between fantasy and science fiction. I wouldn't call Star Wars science fiction. I would call it space fantasy or space opera, something along those lines.
Okay, I'll buy that. Space action.
Space, yeah, it's an action fairy tale. You know, it's a fairy tale, but it's just set in outer space. The principal characters are the same as King Arthur. There's a young guy going through puberty and an old wise guy to show him the ropes.
There it is.
Pretty much it. All right, it's a tale as old as time, everybody. Even in these here parts. So we were flipping through the old YouTube premium because we have a free trial to it. And we saw the Stargate movies on there. We tried to watch one of them from 2018, but it wasn't very good.
Yeah, we did watch something.
But we did want to go back and watch this because in a lot of ways, this is the OG ancient alien theory on film. And this was fun to watch in retrospect of all of that, because we see Ra in this movie, who is one of the ancient Egyptian gods, I believe. And we even see, according to the cast and credits here, Horus and Anubis as like his guards and protectors. Like, and we know these names from Egyptian lore and history.
Absolutely.
And it's pretty cool to see some of these ideas played out in the movie. All right. Well, for those of you who are not familiar, whenever Nika and I do a hold up episode, we kind of look at how a movie that came out a long time ago holds up against today's metrics, story-wise, filmmaking-wise, acting, music, culturally. These are all the things that we're going to be talking about in this episode with regards to the movie Stargate here. But before we get into all of that, I think we need to just give a brief overview of the movie. Maybe it's been a while since you've seen it, or maybe you've never seen it at all, but you're kind of curious to just listen along. So here's a little background information about the 1994 film Stargate. And it was released by MGM and United Artists in 1994, as I mentioned. It was directed by Roland Emmerich, who would go on to direct Independence Day as his next film after this, which was a huge hit, thanks to Will Smith, probably. But the cinematography was done by Carl Walter Lindenlaub. The editing was done by two gentlemen, Michael J. Duthie and Derek Brechen. The music, we're going to have lots to say about the music. Mr. David Arnold, the composer of this fine film. And the producers were Joel B. Michaels, Oliver Eberle, and Dean Devlin. And along with that producing credit, Dean Devlin was the writer, along with the director, Roland Emmerich, for the screenplay.
What was the budget on this movie?
The budget was about $55 million, and the gross was $196.5 million. So it about quadrupled its money.
Wow.
And I feel like in the 90s, that was considered somewhat of a successful movie.
I think it will be considered success nowadays. Although it's not going to cost you that much money, it will cost you.
Yeah, I mean,
10x.
it would probably cost you like $200 to $300 million to make today. So you'd have to be looking at grossing, somewhere between 800 million and 1.2 billion. And I just don't know if it's going to get that in the theaters or on home release or anything like that. So
Yeah, that might be a tough one.
all right. Well, the cast for this movie was also quite interesting, and there's a lot of known talent in this movie, and also some like known sort of smaller role actors, I guess. But let's get on with it. We got Kurt Russell, everybody, as the lead actor in this film, and boy, oh boy, was he looking stellar at this time in life. I wonder what he was eating at this point in his life. He looked good. His jaw looked great. His hair looked amazing. According to something I read, during the first shooting of the film, he didn't think his hair looked light enough, so they had his hair lightened.
Really?
Yeah, and that was his suggestion. And I thought he looked really good. He looked kind of like an action movie hero, comic booky.
He looked like a G.I. Joe.
Yeah,
Straight
he looked
up.
like it's straight out of G.I. Joe. Totally, he could have been his own G.I. Joe unit.
Yeah.
This could have been a G.I. Joe movie.
It could have been. Set
Why
in
not?
Egypt. Why not?
All right. Well, James Spader was the other main character in this movie. He is Dr. Daniel Jackson. Kurt Russell, by the way, plays Colonel Jack O'Neill. He's an Air Force Special Ops. And James Spader is Dr. Daniel Jackson. He's this Egyptologist who's like got some kind of out there theories. He's got a cultish fan base, it seems like.
He's a linguist as well, so he does have outrageous theories.
I guess James Spader thought that the story for this idea was really outrageous and like kind of, I think, wanted to see it through.
I see. Okay. Too bad it
Again, this
wasn't-
predates a lot of like known ancient alien theory stuff, but if you had read Eric von Daniken or anything like that, you would feel right at home in 1994. That book was written in the 60s. I'm sure a lot of people had been exposed to it that saw this movie. In fact, that was probably their marketing audience, right?
Oh, I would guess so. Do you think Shatner would have been a better choice? Well,
I don't think so. I think it was too close to Star Trek. I think he's also probably just a little too old at that point, even. All right. The raw alien was played by a child, actually, because of reasons we'll get into with the plot. But that was played by Jay Davidson, kind of an unknown today. Vivica Lindfors played Dr. Catherine Langford. She is the daughter of the guy who originally discovers this Stargate in Egypt in 1928 at the beginning of the movie. She also is the one who hires Dr. Daniel to come in, and we'll get into that in a minute with the plot. But some other interesting characters, Skara. We might get into this in the plot more. Those are the four basic characters, and so let's get into the plot, Nika.
Okay.
The movie, as I just mentioned, begins in the Giza Plateau at the Great Pyramids, where some stones and a metallic ring are unearthed during this archaeological excavation. And then we just kind of fast forward right away to 1994. And we meet Dr. Daniel, who we mentioned, who is played by James Spader. And, without getting into too much detail here, he's giving a lecture. Dr. Catherine is there. She's now older. She's the daughter of the guy who found this in 1928. So 1994, she's an old woman now. She kind of mysteriously gets Daniel to come with her after his speech and take a look at something. And one thing leads to another. And basically, before long, he's looking at Egypt's symbols on rocks and deciphering them, which people haven't been able to do for like 2 years of having looked at these things. We also learned that the U.S. government is involved with this.
Of course it is.
And once Daniel explains everything that they are looking to figure out from these rocks, he is invited to see this metallic ring underground. They have basically the Stargate underground, and his symbols turn it on. He's able to get it turned on, and after that, they arrange a mission to go through, and he's going to go with. And Kurt Russell's going to go too because his son, it's revealed at the beginning of the movie, killed himself by accident with his gun, and he's just depressed. He doesn't have anything to live for, so he's like, I'll go through the Stargate.
Yeah, he's got nothing to live for. And so he has a mission of his own.
So yeah, we have a mission now. So there's like a team of soldiers led by Kurt Russell, and Dr. Daniels with them. And they get the Stargate turned on again, and they go through. This happens really quickly. This happens pretty fast, and doesn't take long to get into it. And all of a sudden, when they go through this Stargate, they are inside of another pyramid. And as they walk out of it, I guess, outside, they realize they are on a new planet with 3 moons and also a great pyramid. So some familiar scenery from Earth and some not so familiar scenery with the 3 moons. But they are otherwise alone on this crazy planet. And they are shown as they go through the Stargate that they are traversing space. And it's not made clear exactly how many light years or anything away they are. But this planet is apparently called Abydos.
Okay.
Abydos, I don't know, Abydos. I call it Abydos, I guess. Anyways, we kind of see some odd bantering between Jackson and these military soldiers as they're setting up a base camp. And we also see Kurt Russell underground doing some mysterious things with one of the boxes. And it appears he has some kind of like nuclear weapon with him of some kind.
Yeah, he's got a secret mission of his own.
He's got, so you start to get this idea already that there's ulterior motives from going through the Stargate, at least from the military side of things, right?
Yes.
And a classic tale of course the military is not going to be on the good side, right?
Of course.
Or at least they'll be on the side of protecting everything at all costs.
Yeah, they are protecting the Earth, potentially. Well, Jackson, meanwhile, like, because he's having some odd banterings with the rest of the military personnel, he decides to kind of wander off on his own, spots an animal, wildlife. It is pretty tame. It's not dangerous, kind of obviously. It's eating grass or some hay.
in the desert or something. And anyways, Jackson winds up getting caught up, and it's because it has a harness on it.
Yes.
So there's some kind of civilization it's revealed as well. And he winds up getting caught up in the harness and dragged off by this creature as like Kurt Russell and a couple of the other soldiers
Try to find
chase
him.
after. Anyways, this leads them to this village, and there's tons of people there. They look like us. They're Earthlings, sort of, and they speak a very similar Egyptian dialect. So much so that Jackson is sort of able to make out what they're saying.
Yes.
So that helps break down the whole language barrier of being on a foreign planet millions of miles away from probably our own galaxy.
Yeah, they do find a way to communicate at some point. It takes them a little bit, but they do.
They also notice that Dr. Daniel here, James Spader, is wearing this necklace that has the Eye of Ra on it. And we are able to learn from this culture that, like, Ra is their god and they worship him and whatnot. And that's kind of interesting because that ties back to our own mythology on Earth. And of course, Dr. Daniel knows all about that because he's an Egyptologist.
Sure.
So we meet Kasuf, who is played by, oh my gosh, what's his name? Eric Avery. If you've seen 80s movies, you would totally recognize this guy. But he's like the leader of the village that they're at. And it's kind of funny. We also meet his son. His name is, oh my gosh. Okay, his name is Skara with 2 A's in the middle. And his daughter, who's older, is Shauri, I guess is how I'm going to pronounce it. And Alexis Cruz plays Skara, and Mili Avital plays Shauri, the daughter of Kasuf. Anyways, because of the necklace Daniel's wearing, they kind of mistaken the group of them as emissaries of Ra, or like being sent by Ra. So they're kind of brown nosing, and like they even offer. So Kasuf offers his daughter to Daniel in marriage as like a gift,
Right.
basically to the gods, an offering, if you will. Kind of humorous, shows the very primitive culture of these people. You know. It's also revealed that a lot of them are mining, right? And like
Yes.
sort of indentured into some kind of
So,
work,
yes.
slavery for Ra or on Ra's behalf.
Yes, if you watch Temple of Doom with Indiana Jones, it's a very similar vibe.
Yeah,
Not
there
as
is
big.
some of that vibe to it, and more on that in a little bit. All right, so I wrote down a couple things here. One is that aside from Jackson getting promised to the daughter, we also see Kurt Russell sort of form a bond with the younger son here. He teaches him how to make like a lighter, or shows him his Zippo lighter. And the kid was kind of fascinated by it because they're very primitive and like it takes a lot of work for them to make fires. So just be able to do it in the palm of your hand is like, whoa, that's cool. And then, of course, he picks up the gun and was like, I want to see what this does. And Kurt Russell yells at him and he kind of like runs away scared. Still, they showed the bonding part and they continue to bond kind of throughout the movie. Like the kid emulates the salute a lot, like
I
that they do
know.
to each other. It's kind of cute, sort of probably propaganda in a way too for the military. At this point, Jackson and Shauri kind of go on a date, I guess, like at night together by themselves, and he winds up finding like one of their old temples, and there's some hieroglyphs in there, and he finds 6 of the symbols that they're looking for because the problem was they were supposed to go through the Stargate and come right back. And when they got there, that's why Daniel went with them. He wasn't able to turn the Stargate back on because nothing in the room or in the realm of the room showed the symbols. So finally, when he meets the girl and goes on the date with her in the middle of the night, he finds the symbols in this temple that he's looking for, except, there's only 6, not 7, right? One of
Yep.
them's missing. And not only is it missing, it appears like it was purposefully destroyed. This is a interesting part of the movie because Daniel starts trying to explain, I think, to Chaudhry what he's looking for, and he starts carving the symbol in the sand with his finger, and she immediately turns away right away, and you are able to learn through the sequence that writing is forbidden, and that like Ra has forbidden any of these people to
Right.
do any writings of any kind. So the fact that Daniel does it so freely, I think, is catches her off guard for sure.
Yeah, makes you wonder why that was. Whether Rod didn't want all these people to learn where they came from, or communicating better, or try to learn about their past.
I don't think Ra wanted the Stargate turned back on and the rebellious Earthlings coming through, because it seems like the Earthlings didn't want themselves going through the portal anymore to be given into slavery. At the same time, Ra didn't want like a bunch of them coming through and rebelling or telling everybody that the gig was up.
He definitely did not want to do that. All right.
So Jackson's pretty excited here that he's found some of the symbols, and because the army guys, the military personnel, was not so happy that they couldn't just turn around and go right back to Earth.
Yeah, they were really upset.
And so Jackson's excited to tell them that he found the symbols, and they kind of regroup and leave and go back to the pyramid. But in the meantime, our buddy Ra has landed. He has this pyramidal shaped spacecraft that actually lands on top of the pyramid. It just kind of like stacks on it like a cone.
Right. It really does. It's like, yeah.
If you were to imagine like an orange cone as a pyramid, maybe like a little wider, like take an orange cone and then stack another one on top of it. That's kind of what happens here.
Pretty much.
But I feel like it was like charging the ship, right? Like it was like making it, giving it some energy or something. Like it was a docking station almost for your phone.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. Also, he had this bed inside that ship where he could just regenerate himself constantly.
Yeah. It's
Like a cryo bed, but not in water.
Well, he's very old, right? And
Right.
he's sort of an immortal space traveler, if I'm reading the story correctly. I feel like this was like a docking station for the ship, and we're privy to some of the ancient alien, like that the Great Pyramid is actually an old ancient power plant.
It fits.
And so when you see the ship just kind of dock on it, like it's like, oh yeah, it's giving it some power, charging, getting ready for the next interstellar trip. All right. So Ra's arrived. They head back to the pyramid area now, and they find that their military's wiped out. Ra's soldiers took out most of their soldiers. They get into like a firefight here, and the rest of them get pretty much wiped out pretty quick. It's down to Jackson and O'Neill pretty fast, and the Ra has these soldiers that look like the Egyptian horse head creatures that are in the hieroglyphs.
Yeah, he has a Horus and another guy with him.
Anubis. That's who their names are in the cast, at least. And
Okay. So
but
those
these are just helmets.
Right, those are helmets, and those are his personal bodyguards.
Correct.
Not necessarily a bunch of soldiers, because I don't think they ever showed his military.
Yeah, there's no like Ra army here. He just has a couple bodyguards, and then because as an alien he has possessed the body of a child, like he hangs out with a bunch of children.
Right.
And that's, I think, one of the Indiana Jones parallels we made to Temple of Doom, because you literally have a bunch of people working as slaves in a mine while like a child emperor like type figure is ruling over them with a bunch of kids with them.
Exactly.
Anyways, so they come before Ra, and this is basically when the movie picks up and kind of enters into the final series of events, if you will. So Jackson actually gets shot and dies here, while O'Neill makes like he reaches for a weapon or something, and it creates a ruckus, and Jackson is accidentally killed in the fire. Now this is where the movie kind of gets weird. He's put into the isolation chamber that looks like an Egyptian sarcophagus, and he's rejuvenated. His wounds are healed, and he's alive again. And Ra basically reveals to him that O'Neill brought the nuke, and he intends to now send the nuke back through the Stargate to Earth with apparently a bunch of this material that's being mined, which is going to cause not only a nuclear blast to go off on Earth, but it's going to magnify that blast to basically wipe out the entire planet.
Well, he says he created humans, therefore now he can destroy them and
Correct.
eliminate them.
This is right out of like the Anunnaki theory that like human beings were created by gods to be miners and slavers of gold.
Straight up from the Enoch book and the Anunnakis.
The Book of Enoch, which is a book of the Bible that is not in most versions. Enoch, by the way, Moses' grandfather.
Yep.
In
And had a spaceship.
he saw the earth from the round, everybody.
So he has to be somewhere above
Yep.
the earth.
So we knew about that flat earth stuff a long time ago from our boy Enoch, which thank God for the Ethiopians.
That preserved that
They
Bible.
preserved that book, and good for them.
Knowing that he saw the earth as a sphere back in the day, if we had that book included in the Bible, we might have been advanced so much further by now.
We might have. Anyways, at least we found it.
Yeah, that's true.
So yeah, Ra comes up with this plan, and basically everything backfires because the villagers come back and revolt against Ra finally because they're not happy that he took and killed their new friends. I guess marriage will do that.
Yeah, they thought
Strong
they
bonds of
could-
marriage with Daniel and
connected.
Shauri, and she is of course mortally wounded at some point near the climax, and Daniel has to bring her to the portal while Kurt Russell fights. I think it was Anubis at this point because Digimon Houston, by the way, he plays Horus in this movie. Before The Gladiator and before Amistad and some of those other early works, there was Stargate, everybody. All right, so she is mortally wounded. Daniel gets her into the isolation chamber, and Ra gets distracted by other things going on with the battle outside, and Kurt Russell is able to defeat Anubis, and as he sends him back through this teleporter device, Daniel and Shauri are able to transport at the same time down back to where Kurt Russell is. They go to shut off the nuclear device that Ra has basically started, and
Well, they cannot disarm the bomb either.
right, and so Ra has started the nuclear device, and they cannot turn it off. And at this point, Ra is trying to leave. His little pyramid spaceship has taken off, and it is now in the atmosphere. When Kurt Russell gets this idea, and he decides to beam the nuclear device up back to the spaceship again, and it goes through with about 5 seconds left, and it's not enough time for Ra to realize what has happened or get rid of the nuke, and his spaceship goes ba-boom, and the immortal god Ra dies thanks to the hands of Kurt Russell.
It's a great ending on that part.
It was a great ending. Oh man, I'm sure I missed a lot to this story, but I think that recapped a pretty good amount of the movie.
You got the essence of the whole movie.
Absolutely.
It's worth watching, even though I think it's over 2 hour length of that movie.
Well, it'll be under 2 hours if you don't watch the credits.
I see.
So it'll probably take you around an hour and 55 to get through this movie. It moves at a really nice clip, though, I think. Like I said, it really gets into the Stargate quickly, and they get onto this foreign planet. And I think there's enough intrigue and mystery there to hold you through to get to the more action-oriented parts when Ra arrives and things start to get interesting. Now, culturally, I have to say, I kind of want to start here with this movie because, in retrospect, this movie was like way ahead of its time.
Oh, yeah.
We've brought up the Ancient Aliens thing that happened more in the late 2000s. So to be kind of 15 years ahead of that is really interesting, and now, like, Giorgio Tsoukalos from Ancient Aliens is a meme. And guys like Graham Hancock and Christopher Dunn have been regular guests on the Joe Rogan podcast. So the cultural phenomenon behind Ancient Aliens and stuff is a lot more well-known today, I feel like, than it was ever in 1994. That's for sure. These ideas were probably, like James Spader said, like, he thought the movie idea was ridiculous. And the reason why he wanted to do the movie, despite the fact that he felt the script was ridiculous, was because he felt like it was going to be an adventure to make, and that's what movies are about.
That's great.
It is
great for him.
Yeah, it is. And in a way, that kind of thinking is ahead of its time, too. You know, even though he couldn't see the theory and maybe didn't know all the interesting ancient astronaut details that existed like we do today. Yeah, it's kind of fascinating.
It is fascinating. And the fact that we hear so much more about aliens, UFOs, things in the sky that nobody can explain what it is. It's built off of this kind of a movie.
Oh, absolutely. There's triangle-shaped UFOs. There's pyramids, and there's
About
parallels
pyramids.
between these things that are drawn just based on simple primitive shapes.
The whole movie plot is very simple. It's not very convoluted. There's not a lot nuances that you have to keep in mind. That's what's happening. It's a straightforward story.
Yeah, basically, if you believe in wormholes, your suspension for disbelief on this one isn't really go that far. Like, pyramids exist. Now, the extraterrestrial space traveler Ra will have to, I guess you'll have to interpret how you take that one.
It's an alien. So
But just the setup, I mean, like the idea of going through a wormhole and having it be some ancient Egyptian artifact is not out of the realm of a lot of people's possibilities anymore.
no, and the wormhole was considered at that time groundbreaking. The way they shot it and what was being shown during that time.
Interesting.
That whole visual effect
Yeah.
at that time. in the
It's supposed to be breaking the like space-time continuum, and cool. It was fun. Now, I guess aside from the cultural parts of the movie that are now kind of ingrained in society that were ahead of its time, I feel like the story itself is pretty classical. It has the girl, if you will. I felt like this does not necessarily hold up the best, the romantic angle of this movie. It seemed a little bit cheesy and too simple, I guess. But it all works for the basic plot points of the movie.
You knew the girl was going to be important because she was the only one that had no mud on her face.
Oh my gosh, yeah. It was like everyone else has been working in the mine all day, and she was like kissed by the sun.
Not a speck of dirt.
Not a speck. It was funny, and at the same time, it was not bad enough where we weren't able to, I think, look past it.
Yeah, it wasn't in your face like that.
And the romance was cheesy, but some of the other parts of the movie were cheesy as well. But I found this mostly to be between the interactions between the people that were native to the planet, Abydos, and the Earthlings. A lot of the interactions were boiled down to simple interactions like fire, like man make fire in hand. I guess I really don't think that things in life would be that simple in this situation.
Well, maybe if you go to primitive tribes as a modern human, tribes that haven't seen anything from the modern world, it might be similar to that.
I suppose that's true, because that, after all, is the basis for the ancient astronaut theory, is that any advanced beings that would come before a primitive society would be viewed as like God or godlike. Yeah. So the fact that they are greeted as like emissaries of Ra or whatever it's called, I guess does lend credence to like that theory. For those that don't know, during World War II, American ships were dropping like loot boxes basically from the sky onto some of the primitive islanders in the South Pacific Ocean, and they had, they're not industrialized.
There's primitive tribes.
Primitive tribal people who live off the land, literally, and all of a sudden they got loot boxes with like cans of beans in it and stuff and canned goods, and it's like, oh, the gods are giving us food. That's what they thought.
How did they open those cans?
Well, they have rocks and hammers and stuff, primitive people know how to bash things in. I think they figured it out.
But the point is, the people that were dropping it out from the planes were believed to be the gods.
Correct. And so, in this movie, yeah, you can make that argument. And okay. I think it is good that they made the interaction simple, maybe for the sake of the story and not too complicated. But at the same time, it's like hard to believe that like he and the girl would fall in love so quickly. Or
well, if you're the only girl that has zero dirt on your face and everybody looks dirty and filthy, you will gravitate to the clean person.
Yeah, I suppose you're right. That's another great observation by you, Nika.
Thanks.
All right. Well, I again, most of this holds up and creates some fun, nice, memorable scenes. The lighter scene for sure comes to mind. The saluting with the kids and the soldiers, imitating them. It made for some nice interactions. And the story, it's got that classic vibe. It's right at a good runtime. It doesn't overstay its welcome.
And it didn't feel dragging at any point in the movie.
Yeah, the only complaint I had about the visuals really was I felt like some of the special effects shots don't hold up really to today's standards.
That's true.
Some do, like some of the flying shots. Ra unleashes a couple spacecraft to track down some of the primitives or shoot at them from the sky.
The ships hold up to me. The only thing that didn't hold up was the CGI of the alien face.
The CGI on the alien face, and again, it's 1994. It's like pre-Star Wars, which is what the prequel movies kind of pushed a lot of that CGI stuff forward. This was more of I felt like it was a double exposure effect with like, because the alien is possessing the child's body, so we only see his face truly a couple times through like some kind of like double projection effect that's supposed to be bleeding through the kid's face underneath. It's a little odd.
It is. But the kid by himself had some little bit of a visual effects with his eyes, and that felt a little bit odd.
Yeah. Again, anything that's pre-1999 is probably going to have more of a analog-y look to it, I guess. It reminded me a little bit of like Superman's eye laser effects from like even going back to the 70s, because they were probably still using the same technique at the time. You know, like, yeah, maybe some things had advanced, but not everything.
Yeah.
And this looked like a movie that relied on a lot of the old tricks, rear projection with the pyramid shots and to show the scale and scope.
But
It's so important, though, and they did show it, and they did create that illusion that, like, oh, we are really on another planet here.
It did feel organic. It didn't feel like there was a picture in the background.
Yes, agreed. So, yeah, just a couple of those face shots didn't quite hold up. All
What do you
right,
think
well,
of the action sequences?
I thought the action sequences were mostly pretty good. I guess I felt a little bit underwhelmed, I should say, by the ending of the, I guess when the villagers decide to band together and descend on the enemy at the end. It didn't seem like there was enough there anymore for them to fight against to make it like
Yeah, it was a mob against
feel like
two.
there was a lot at stake, you know?
So that kind of felt a little empty.
Yeah, it seems like they showed up a little too late or something to the party, but at that point, I think we're more interested in what's happening with Ra on the spaceship inside with O'Neill and with Dr. Daniel. So, all right, well, it is time to turn our attentions to one of the weaker points of the film. We need to talk about the music in this movie. With all due respect to David Arnold, this isn't personal by any means. This film score does not really hold up very well.
It does not.
I think it's what makes some of the movie feel cheesy, actually, is the music playing, especially this like Egyptian fanfare, I guess I'll call it. Like it's very loud and very like orchestry and a lot of instruments and trumpets and brass. It's very brassy but Egyptian sounding, I guess.
It didn't fit well with the story.
It had some of the like tones of The Mummy maybe, and like you brought up Indiana Jones as well, but not in a good way. I don't know how else to put it. It felt too big sometimes for what I would have liked. I feel like this movie would be made with like a darker soundtrack today, just because it's like you're going into foreign territory with aliens and stuff.
Yeah, there's slavery. There's a lot of
Gods.
lore. Yeah, it should have more of a sinister tone.
I feel like it leaned too much into the desert and like Lawrence of Arabia and just some of those older movies. And I wish it would have had more of a modernized soundtrack for even 1994, because I felt like it was like in the 70s. Independence Day had more of that modern, dark, alien sound interwoven in with some of the orchestra parts. Because David Arnold did that movie too. He went on to score that movie as well, and I just wish there was a little bit more of that present in this, maybe the darkness. And this movie isn't as dark, especially like in Independence Day, the first one. It's not necessarily a dark movie, but I mean, like, they do attack. They do have the Area 51 scene with like the some pretty dark shit going on underground when it comes to what we see in this movie by comparison.
And then the Independence Day has more explosions.
It does. It has more explosions and more action scenes.
Where the Stargate does not.
It does not. It's a lot more about
Plot.
finding the symbols and getting back home kind of story, and that they have to go far to get what they need to go home.
Yeah.
So the music does, unfortunately, we just found ourselves turning the volume down a lot at some points because it was just like so overwhelmingly blasty, and it just felt like it didn't fit anymore versus what you might see or hear today with a movie that has the same plot. And a lot of it could have been the same performances, the same acting, like the same pacing, editing wise. I'm sure if it was made today, some of the visual effects would have been done and handled differently. But aside from that, I feel like almost everything else in this movie holds up to a pretty strong scale. It was just the music.
The music kind of makes the movie cheesy.
It does. And it's more of a distraction, I think, in the end than anything, because you notice it and it takes you out of the movie a little bit, like, oh, we looked at each other. It's like, well, that's a little up there. That's a little bit much.
But if you can get over the music part just to watch the movie for the story, I think it's worth watching.
And that's why I say it's a distraction, because it didn't prevent us from staying engaged with or watching the movie. It just made us laugh out loud a couple times and be like, oh, that was a bit eccentric, right?
Yeah.
I think this movie's just got a bit eccentric at times, isn't it?
Yeah, you can make that assumption, I guess. Comparison.
But overall, like, I mean, there's a lot to like here in this offering and this presentation, and I think a lot that holds up.
It does. For the movie from the 1990s, we watched different movies from that period, and they don't hold up. And the sound effects don't hold up a lot of times in those movies, too.
Yeah, I think they also had the benefit of not having, like, a lot of organic sound effects because they were creating science fiction, like a lot of the... Now, there were some guns on the American soldiers, and they were firing them off, and they didn't stand out as being overtly bad like some of the 80s action movies that we watched. So, yeah, that's good. That shows that time is evolving here. And we can point to these, 1994. That's gun effects, good.
Gun effects
1989, not quite there yet. I'm looking at you, Lethal Weapon. Damn.
Lethal Weapon and Die Hard, another one.
Yeah, they weren't necessarily the softest sound effects in the book at that point. They didn't have that warm wooden vinyl sound, even if they were like loud explosions, it doesn't mean... Anyways, the movie itself, I think it does hold up. Honestly, I would not be mad if they remade this movie. I feel like they could really screw it up too if they did, but I also feel like I wouldn't hate it, I guess, if they were to try and attempt this. Apparently, it's in the works. I've been reading a little bit this morning as we were getting ready for the podcast, and like...
It's in the works? Who is trying to remake Stargate?
Well, the original producer and writer and director.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they wanted to be involved with it, and they wanted to make a series that like ties in with it, and of course they do. Everyone wants a cinematic universe nowadays, and like, I mean, in some ways, Stargate was the original, because this movie came out in 1994, but in 1997 or 1999, I don't remember exactly, a Stargate TV show launched for like over 10 years. And there were spin-offs of that, and finally it all came to an end. I think they tried to rejuvenate it with that other movie we were watching, Stargate Catherine Origins. And that's about Catherine, the daughter of the guy who found this ring to begin with.
And that's a movie that was made in 2018.
It was a web series that was made in 2018 that was recut into a feature film later. The problem with it is that it's so small scale. They don't show anything.
They don't, and the acting is not that good.
It's not. So, anyways, all right. Well, our verdict at the end of all this is that Stargate, the 1994 film with Kurt Russell and James Spader, absolutely does hold up to today's movie standards, maybe minus the soundtrack. the film score itself, and you'll rarely hear me criticize a movie's music. I'm generally easy to please and love a lot of different styles of music, but this one just jumped out as like too much. It was overselling it, and it was cringy sometimes. So aside from all that, though, I think everyone should give Stargate a fresh chance here and see if you can get yourself sucked into it. Some good old ancient alien fun. That's what this movie was. It was fun. And it had good morals to the story.
And it had a classic ending. Boy gets
Classic
the girl,
ending.
saves the planet. Boom.
Nuclear explosions go off in space. Bam.
Everybody lives happily ever after.
What more could anyone ask for? Especially at a good pace. There was no way that this felt like 2 hours in 1994 in the theater. There's no way, especially if it didn't feel like 2 hours today in 2025. So
Yeah, good point.
I have a feeling in 1994 that this movie probably went over pretty well with audiences that were like ready for something like that, in a sense, like a sci-fi crowd. I can't guarantee that it would have appealed to everybody back then, but if you were into sci-fi in the 90s, I'm sure this movie probably would have pleased you and been a crowd pleaser.
Definitely.
Okay, well, that's going to do it for this episode of the Kanika Lifestyle Podcast, a special hold-up edition. We're going to get to do some more of these sprinkled throughout the year. It's just fun for us to reflect on movies and shows from the past and really truly look at whether or not they stand the test of time. I think we grew up saying like, oh, that's a classic. It'll always be there. The Beatles, they'll always be there. But I think you have to re-examine things under the microscope to truly look at them.
Absolutely. And knowing how the movies are made today and how the endings are, a lot of times with the cliffhangers, they leave the door open just in case we want to have a sequel, prequel, or series. This one has a clear-cut ending.
It does. It has all of that, what you just said, because it becomes a series later. It does bring back some of these characters, not the same actors, but same characters. And so it's like the original Star Wars, too, to a degree, is that could have been a one-off. And it could have ended just fine. It's a clean story.
Right.
And that's what this is. It's a really clean story.
It has a beginning, middle, and the end.
And it has life lessons sprinkled in throughout. So that's what we really want in modern storytelling is morality and life lessons brought back into storytelling. Thank you very much. All right, everybody. Well, we are going to take it off the air for now and be back soon with some more holdups and some more lifestyle chat and some more gaming topics to be coming soon. In the meantime, please follow us and subscribe to our podcast if you hear this. It will really help us out a lot and, could mean the deal between breaking even some months. So appreciate all of that subscribing and liking that you guys do for us. It just takes a little click. Promise won't give you carpal tunnel.
And thanks for sticking with us.
Thanks for sticking with us. It's been over a year since we did a hold-up episode, but man, it was fun. And we'll be back.